Hello everybody. Quick video here on weighted averages. Let's just jump right into it. Don't get freaked out over what I have in the green over here. I'll explain all that in a second. We all know, hopefully, how to calculate an average, just a normal one. We add up all the values of whatever data points we have, divide by the number of values, and that's our average. What a weighted average tries to take into account is that you might have different groups, each with a different average, and we try to find some sort of overall average of these different groups. And that's what's called a weighted average. Okay, so for example, it might be something like, say, 30 people got a score of 50 and 20 people got a score of 10. What's the average score of the two different groups? Okay, and we're going to practice some of these problems in a second, but let me just talk about what I've got over here in the green. This is going to be, these abbreviations here, which I defined, are going to be our master equation for solving any weighted average problem. And here's how it basically goes. The weighted average, is going to be equal to, you are going to figure out, what I did here was we're going to take the average of every single group that we have, and it can be as many as we want. Typically on the GRE it's 2 or 3 groups, but you might have more. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to find the average of every single group. We're going to add them all up. Okay, so let's say I have 3 different groups. So the average of group A, the average of group B, and the average of group C. Okay, but very importantly, the next bit here, the number of times that average occurs, we have to multiply each of these by that, right? So let's say I had 20 people that got a score of 30. I've got 10 people that got a score of 15, and say 5 people that got a score of 100. Whatever. I'm just making these numbers up. You multiply each of your averages by the number of times that average occurs, or the percentage of times that that event happens. Okay, so basically it's the two different things that you'll be tested on: how many times it happens, or the percentage of times it happens. Either way, it's the same thing. Okay, so if I've got a percentage, just throw that in there. If I've got a number, throw that in there. Okay, and then all of that, after you've added all those things together, you just divide it by t, which is the sum of all the n's. So in this case, it would be whatever NA is plus NB plus NC. So divide by the total. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Let's apply this. Here's an example, couple example problems. Look at this one. A class of 25 students took a science test. 10 had this average and the other had this average. What's the average score of the whole class? Or we know that we're dealing with a weighted average because we've got two different groups, right? This one had an average of 80. This had an average of 60. Okay, so we can just set up our formula. The weighted average is going to be equal to the actual scores. So we have 80 was one score, plus the other score, the other average was 60. So put that down. Okay, and then all we have to do is multiply those two averages by the number of times it happens. Let's see, 10 times, 10 students got an 80, so I'm going to put 10 times 80 right there. And then the other students out of 25, so that'd be what, 15? 15 students, the remaining number, got a score of 60, okay? And now all we have to do is add the number of times this thing happens, so 10 plus 15 is 25, and there we have it. And at this point you could just, I'm going to cheat here, I'm going to use a calculator. Let's see, that's going to be 800 plus 15 times 60. I believe that's 900 if I'm not wrong. Probably am. 1700 is the top. Divide that by 25. The overall average is 68, the weighted average of the entire group. And that's it. Simple as that. Okay, let's try another one here. Now, this one's a little bit different. This doesn't give us the number of times something happens, but it does give us percentages. No problem. It's saying at a health club, this percentage of the members are men, this percentage of the members are women, average age of the men is 30, and the average age is 40. What is the average age of all the members? Okay, so we have two different groups of averages, so we know we're dealing with weighted average. Let's just set it up. The weighted average is going to be equal to, let's see what we got. Well, we got a score of 30. One average is 30, plus the other average is 40. Okay, and then they gave us percentages of when that happens. So it's 80% of the time it's 30, so I'm going to just multiply that by 80%, or 0.8. And then 20% of the time it's 40, so I'll just multiply that by 20%, or 0.2. Okay, divide by those two numbers added together. 0.8 plus 0.2 is 1. Okay, so then at that point, now we've got all our stuff plugged in, we can just whip out our handy dandy calculators, and let's see what we get. 0.8 times 30 is equal to 24. Oops. Okay, and then for the other one, 0.2 times 40 is equal to 8. Add those together, 24 plus 8 gets us to 32. And then, 32 divided by 1, well, that's just 32. So our weighted average of these two different groups is 32. Okay, that's it. All right, last one. One other example here. Look at this one. This is worded a little bit weirdly, but we can hopefully see how this is going to go. So it says Rob has received these three the score, this score, that score on 3 quizzes. If the exam is weighted twice as heavily, okay, on the final, if I think they meant to say the final exam, if the final exam is weighted twice as heavily as each of the 3 quizzes, what is the lowest score Rob can get on the exam to have a final average of at least 90? Don't fret too much over the at least for a moment. But here we got something a little bit different. We want a final average, or our weighted average, needs to be equal to 90. All right, so let's set that down. Okay, and then what they told us is that we've got each of these scores here, 96, 89, 85. So we can write those scores down, 96 plus 89 plus 85. And then we're going to multiply them by the number of times those scores happen, which in this case is just 1 time each, right? I know you don't need to write that out, but just bear with me for a moment. Okay, so we have 1 time that happened, 1 time that happened, 1 time this happened. And then it says, you might think to yourself, okay, well, we're only taking 1 final exam, so we should just say that that's 1 as well. But they said that it's weighted twice as heavily, so it's worth twice as much as the other ones. So general rule, not general rule of thumb, what you should do there is, well, just the number that we should do is double whatever the value of the numbers on these ones. So since these only happen 1 time, we're going to put this as 2. And then we don't know what the score is, so that's what we're trying to figure out. I'll put that as X. Okay? If they said, for example, that this was worth 5 times as many points as any of these exams, well, 5 times that number, 5 times 1 would just be 5, and we put that in there. Okay? That's all you have to do there. So now then what we do is we would, last bit is add up all the numbers. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 5. And now we just have to solve for X. What would X have to be in order for us, the weighted average, to end up being at least 90? Okay, so I could say equal to or greater than. All right, well, that's kind of just calculator work at this point. We would do, let's see, 96 plus 89, 96 plus 89 plus 85 is equal to 270. So here's what I've got so far. I've got 90 is equal to 270 plus 2x, and that is divided by 5, right? Now we can just multiply both sides by 5, and that should get us to, kind of jumping around here, should be 450 is equal to 270 plus 2x. And I think at this point, hopefully you're okay with doing the rest of this. We would just subtract 270 from both sides, and that should get us to 180 is equal to 2x. Divide both sides by 2, gets us to X has to be equal to 90. So in order for your final score to be at least 90 points, your final exam, you'd have to score a 90 on it. And that is essentially it for weighted averages.